Hey, it's Clay. Welcome to another video. Today, we're going to take this Stage Right 15 watt dual EL84 tube amp. We're going to pop it open and we're going to mod it. I've got some specific mods in mind. Really, the idea is to turn it into a fire-breathing, high-gain, kind of little mini, you think of Carlos Santana when he got his Mesa Boogie amp, he said that thing really boogies. That's kind of the inspiration here, to take this $140 little tube amp that I bought. We're going to mod the heck out of it, turn it into kind of a screaming lead tone amp that's fun to play. So if you're interested in that, let's go ahead and stick around. Let's dive in. Okay, so I'm confirming pretty confidently that this PCB matches the schematic that I was looking at for the Cub 12R. Specifically, this is V1 right here. And you can see these little, there's a number 1 right there. That's tube number 1. So that would be plate, plate, grid, cathode, heater, plate, grid, cathode, heater. So what I want is, looking at the schematic, I want to mess around with the cathodes. There are a couple of them that don't have bypass resistors, or it's linked in with the gain. And so looking at the schematic right here, this is pin 8. It follows this green trace right here to R27 and C22. R27 is the 10K bias resistor, and C22 is the bypass cap. And then C22 feeds out to like the other side of the gain control. So it goes into this HD3. And feeds into the other side of the gain control. So I think what I'm going to do, if I remove both R27 and C22, and then probably instead of messing around with these little surface mount components, I'm going to just mount it directly there to right there to pin 8. And what I need is like a 1.5K bias resistor and like a 10 microfarad or 25 microfarad bypass cap to ground. Now I think right there, that circle right above the R27 is a ground connection point. I'll check that with a multimeter, but I think it should be. So that's my current plan. Basically, I want to get rid of the cold clipper and see how this thing sounds with regular bias, center biasing, and bypass caps. Should increase gain, should reduce odd order harmonic distortion. That's the thought. Okay, can I just say, finger for reference, these surface mount components are really tiny. Like, this is like the point of no return. I have no idea what I'm doing with this surface mount stuff. It is so small. This is unbelievable. But R27 and C22 are out. So right now, I think this makes sense. If you look at this green diagonal line going right here from this V8 to these two connection points, there is nothing now bridging this to the ground connection over here on the other side. So if I can get a bias resistor here and here, I think we're going to be in the clear. So we're going to try that. Okay, I found something that might work for the ground. If you look at these three right here, they're on the bottom side of these white clips, which is where these connectors go. On the schematic, they're called HD something. And the middle point right here is ground. You can see all this light green area on the side. That's your ground plane. This same one here has it as well. So I could use any of these middle tabs here on the bottom side of the board as a ground connection point. So I might run a wire that connects onto there and then shrink tube it and use that for my ground point for my new cathodes. Okay, got a new resistor, 10 microfarad bypass cap on a black wire that's going to run and connect to the ground tab on the other side on the back of the board. Cover it in shrink tube and should be good to go. Alright, use some flux and some precise soldering. Got that wire grounded. So that cathode should be working. If we flip it over here to the front side, I had to use kind of a big piece of shrink tube, but it should be fine. We're gonna tuck this guy right there. Fit right in between. I think that should work fine. We're gonna do this in the next cathode as well. All right, we're looking at V2. We want V2B R48, which you can see is right here. So if we count 1, 2, 3, that's going to be plate, grid, cathode. And yeah, you can clearly see that 128, I think that's an 820 ohm actually. It's probably upside down. And it's probably 82.1, 820 ohms, R48 to ground. We're going to do the same thing. Next modification, this capacitor here is 22 nanofarads. It's our decoupling cap between the first tube and the second tube. It runs along this trace here to R41 and R45, which forms a voltage divider, to 470K resistor. So it basically dumps half the signal to ground and then runs into the grid of this V2 tube. What I would like to do is, I mean, you probably want some kind of interstage voltage dividing going on there, but I'm really kind of curious to see what it would be like if you removed them and put a pot there instead. That way you could control it. So I think I'm going to remove those, and I'm going to put a 1 meg pot. In theory, when that 1 meg pot is at halfway, it'll be the stock circuit, and then you have a range of adjustment beyond that. Now, like I said, you know, the only thing that's going on between these gain stages here is this decoupling cap. So you probably want some kind of grid leak or grid stopping going on before going into the grid of V2. So setting the pot to like 10 out of 10 is probably not a great idea, but I would say a range of adjustment anywhere from like 3 till 7 would yield some kind of interesting results, I would think. You could probably also add other resistors so that, like, even if the pot's on maximum, you still have a little bit of a voltage divider going on, but I'm not going to mess around with that. I'm just going to do a 1 meg pot. It does also mean I'm going to need to drill a hole in the chassis and add it up here, but I don't think that actually will be too hard. There's plenty of room, probably up in this area. Now this is kind of our master volume here, so I'll probably put it somewhere near that, maybe over here. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. So as far as execution, these two little dinky surface mount resistors here are really tiny. The signal comes in, goes through R41, continues here to the grid, and then it also has this path to ground. So if I take these out, then there will be no path to the grid. So I could tie directly off the leg here of this little capacitor and go send a line out to the pot, take the return of the pot back here, and then run my ground leg to another ground point. That's probably what I'm going to end up doing. Okay, so this solder is going okay. I've got some progress being made here. I've got from this leg of this capacitor, C18, I'm sorry, the 22 nanofarad coupling cap, goes through the red wire into this pot, Second wire goes through the yellow to pin tube of V2. And this third wire goes on the back where I took another one of these ground terminals from one of these connection points. So, I think that's going fine. I picked up I got some new stranded 22 gauge wire from Amazon. It was really, really cheap. And it feels like very spaghetti. It's very loose, which I'm not quite used to. But the wires seem to be taking solder fine. I also got some new flux, so how about that? Paste flux for the win. We're making some progress. I think this will work okay. I've been doing checks for continuity, and everything seems to be doing pretty good so far. I got to admit that working on a board like this really freaks me out. That I'm gonna mess this thing up. It doesn't seem to be very durable. And yeah, these little SMD components are freaky, but I think we're gonna be fine. So let's see if we can get this board back in and get it buttoned up. All right, the next modification involves this. That's the R16 resistor, which is the plate resistor on the second gain stage. I just installed this black 250 picofarad capacitor. So it's coming, this top side is actually the supply of the B+, and then this bottom side is the plate connection to the tube. So it's basically from the signal that's coming out of this tube stage, very high frequencies that pass that 250 picofarad cap will go straight into the B+ supply, which they will see kind of almost like a ground. So it's a treble snubbing capacitor. The thought here is I kind of want to, I'm shifting this amp a little bit away from like a Marshall JCM type deal and more into maybe more of like a Dumble type, or maybe a Soldano. I'm thinking that this will help to keep it a little bit more smooth and less raspy, less biting, less crispy on the top end. So just a little bit of treble snubbing to help darken just a little bit of darkness there, kind of here in the middle of the preamp. Because with, I think, these cathode bypass caps, I'm going to have quite a bit of extra gain on tap. So that's been our next mod. All right, next modification. Out with the Celestion 7080, in with the Eminence red, white, and blues. See how it sounds. All right, I just want to review on the schematic the modifications that I made in case you want to do this yourself. I showed you where to do it, but I didn't really explain what exactly I was doing. So it's really three basic mods. First, on the second and third gain stage, instead of having the 10K cold clipping bias resistor with no bypass cap, and then this variable gain control, which basically adds a bypass cap as you turn the gain up, I removed C22, removed R27, and then added instead a 1.5K bias resistor and a 10 microfarad bypass cap. So you're not getting the cold clipper. You're getting an even centered biased 12AX7 gain stage that's with a full cathode bypass with 10 microfarads. It's pretty much full frequency, maybe just a tiny bit of bass trimming. So you're getting much more signal gain, and you're not getting the cold clipped waveform. Then we go through this decoupling cap. Then here, R41 and R45, I removed them. Instead of a fixed voltage divider, I did a 1 mega ohm pot. The 1 mega ohm pot now sticks out the back, and it kind of serves as a second gain stage control. So you've got gain here, gain 1. This will be gain 2. And really, I found that it works best operating in the middle of its sweep. So you can turn it down to about 20 or 30% to get a cleaner, higher headroom signal. You can turn it up to about 60, 70, 80% to get even higher distortion, higher gain. And then the cathode of this last stage, instead of a warm bias, which if you go back to the 10K, if that is cold bias, then because the signal gets flipped, the cold bias is now on top. So your warm bias is further accentuating and amplifying what happened down here with the cold clipper. You know, if you think about if this was your waveform, well, if you set a cold clipper, the bias is here. It's not in the center. It's to the negative side. So this signal gets clipped. This signal gets clipped. Well, then your waveform goes through a gain stage, and now the positive swing gets squared off, And the negative swing is full frequency, squared off, full frequency, squared off, full frequency. So now center bias would be here, but if you do this 820 ohm, you nudge it up like to about here. So you're further, again, allowing the full size of the waveform to swing, and the clip part gets even more a little bit clipped. So instead of that, the signal is swinging freely on both sides through both of these gain stages, and with the full cathode bypass cap on both and the additional potential from this voltage divider, really what I'm doing in the middle part of this amp is enabling it to have quite a bit more distortion, just higher output. A cathode cold clipper gain stage actually produces very little signal gain. So we're allowing each of these stages to produce quite a bit more gain. Then there is actually one additional mod which I forgot to draw on the schematic, which I will do right now. But basically, I did another cap on the plate of this second gain stage. So if we kind of draw here, going up to the B+, and I want to say it was 250 picofarads. Now this cap will serve to, it's a little bit of a treble cut here. What I didn't want, because we're introducing quite a bit more signal gain, I didn't want it to get harsh or kind of biting, aggressive, kind of zingy, aggressive top end. So this 250 picofarad cap, the intention there was to kind of warm up the signal a little bit more, and I think it did that nicely. So basically allowing those very high frequencies to bypass and just kind of go up to the B+, which is effectively ground. So those are the changes I made to the schematic. All right, I've got the modified Monoprice Stage Right 15 here, running an SE V7 microphone, and got my Strat just plugged straight into the 15 watt mode. Let's start off by just checking the clean tone, because so I'm going to crank the output volume, set the EQ a little bit more of a, just cleaner, a little bit of reverb, see how that still sounds. All right, let's explore, bring the master down to about 5, preamp gain to about 5. So this is the range of the second gain pot. It's pretty like spitty there, which that doesn't really surprise me. There's no grid stopping resistance going on there, so it actually doesn't really shock me that it gets a little weird. You probably don't want to run that gain full out. You want at least a little bit of resistance in front of that grid. So I'm going to back it down to about maybe 2/3. Take the gain up to about 3/4. right, so you guys had a chance to listen to the clips, but my initial subjective thoughts are as follows. Regarding removing the cold clipping bias resistor and instead changing it to more of a neutral bias with a cathode bypass cap. Now that definitely has increased the amount of gain that's happening at 2 of the stages. And so the overall gain in the amp is definitely higher. Now, so we no longer have that asymmetrical clipping. It's more of a neutral bias, but because of the bypass cap, the overall gain has increased by quite a lot. So we have an increase in gain. It's a higher gain amp than it was before, and also the waveform is different. It's less of the JCM 800 flavored distortion and more of I'm not even really sure what it would be comparable to, but it doesn't have the cold clipper. And so to me, I actually think it sounds pretty neat with this setup. It's a little screamer of an amp right now. Kind of fills a hole that I don't really have, which is kind of a lower wattage, higher gain, singing lead tone type feel. It definitely is it cuts really well. There's definitely plenty of mid-range and treble frequencies. You know, maybe in so, you know, I dialed back the cut control, the tone knob a little bit, and kept my treble down. But you know, it definitely retains more of that brighter tonality. But I never thought that it was getting harsh or ice picky in any way. So I actually thought it sounded really cool. Kind of a unique tone that I really haven't heard much before. I'm going to say somewhere in the range, it's still kind of in the Marshall world to me. But, you know, not having that cold clipper definitely moves it away from the JCM 800 and really is kind of its own. This is a new and kind of unique thing relative to some of the other amps that I've owned and played. So if you're interested in doing this mod, you know, it's definitely an adventure. I would say taking this thing apart and putting it back together again, that was a bit of a struggle, mostly just because, you know, this amp was not easy to work on. The way the PCBs were wired, I even was just having some trouble with all those little like interconnect wires as I was putting it together, getting them all back into the right place. And I even had one that seemed to maybe have a little bit of a dodgy connection and had to kind of pull it out and clean it off and put it back in, and it seemed to be working a little bit better. So not an easy amp to work on, and even just the surface mount components and trying to convert from surface mount to through-hole resistors and capacitors, that was a challenge. But in the end, I'm actually kind of pumped where this thing came out. I think it sounds really cool, and it's given this amp a new voice that it maybe didn't have previously. So please let me know your thoughts down below. If you've got this amp, would you consider modding it? Love to hear from you guys. See you again real soon. Thanks. Bye.